On a gloomy morning in a small rural town in Maine, David, an illustrator, examines the aftermath of a freak thunderstorm that happened the previous night. His son Billy calls David and his wife Steph to see the damage, which includes an old tree that has broken through their window and another tree from their neighbor's yard that has fallen onto their lake house. The family notices a strange mist rolling down from the mountains, which David finds odd even after the heavy thunderstorm. David decides to head over to his neighbor's yard to discuss the fallen tree, despite Steph's caution, as there has been a past land dispute between them. David meets his neighbor, Norton, who is struggling to get his chainsaw working. David informs Norton about the damage and notices that Norton's car has also been damaged. Norton asks David for a favor, requesting him to go to town to buy repair materials, hoping it might help mend their strained relationship. David agrees, and they head into town with Billy, encountering a convoy of military vehicles on the way. Norton recognizes the soldiers as being from a nearby military base working on something called Project Arrowhead. Norton asks if David knows anything about it, and David mentions that speculations range from crashed alien spacecraft to supernatural creatures. When they arrive at the town's grocery store, David chats with the employees, Sally and Ollie, who are busy handling the influx of customers. Norton thanks David, and Billy asks if they have reconciled. David replies that it's too early to tell, but for now they are civil. A group of soldiers enters the store, excited for their upcoming leave. One of them, Jessup, shares a smile with Sally before greeting an older woman, Mrs. Repler. Mrs. Repler greets Billy and talks about the storm, mentioning how it has damaged a significant portion of the town. David also notices a woman named Amanda, who gives him a flirty look. Norton sees a military police officer enter the store and speak to Jessup's group. Sirens are then heard from police and fire department vehicles speeding across town. The military police officer orders Jessup and the other soldiers to cancel their vacations and return to base immediately. Suddenly, sirens blare from the nearby military base, and a bloodied man named Dan bursts into the store, hysterically shouting that there are creatures in the mist that took one of his friends. Ollie tries to calm him down, but Dan insists they lock the store doors. One of the shoppers rushes outside to get to his car, but the mist rolls in, enveloping everything. The man's faint screams are the last sound before silence falls. Inside the store, tension rises as everyone stares out the window at the mist, which now surrounds them. Tremors shake the store, and the manager, Bud, advises everyone to stay inside. A woman insists she needs to get home to her kids. Later, David meets Mrs. Repler, who introduces him to Amanda, a newcomer to the town. David tends to Billy, trying to keep him comfortable amidst the growing tension. Ollie informs David that he can find blankets in the loading dock, so David heads there. As he checks the store's generator, which has become clogged, he hears a disturbing noise coming from the roll-up doors. Alarmed, David runs back into the store and warns Ollie and a few others. They grab flashlights and head to the loading dock, where they find something clogging the generator's exhaust. Norm, one of the store employees, plans to clear the clog from outside, but David objects, fearing what might be lurking in the mist. Despite David's warnings, Norm and Jim, another man, mock him and proceed with their plan. As the roll-up doors open, a massive tentacle suddenly lashes out, grabbing Norm and pulling him into the mist. David and Ollie tried desperately to save Norm, but the tentacles wound him severely. More tentacles appear, and Ollie rushes to get an axe. The tentacles reveal claws, ripping chunks of flesh from Norm. Ollie attempts to sever the tentacle, but it pulls Norm out of the door, and Norm disappears into the mist, screaming. After securing the doors, David confronts Jim, blaming him for Norm's death. They decide to inform the others in the store, but when David tells Norton, he doesn't believe them, thinking they are trying to get revenge for a past lawsuit. David tries to prove the truth by showing Norton the blood and the severed tentacle, but Norton remains skeptical, accusing them of staging the scene. Inside the store, tension escalates as Mrs. Carmody gains influence over the frightened shoppers, preaching that the mist is divine retribution and that a blood sacrifice is needed to appease it. Meanwhile, Billy overhears the soldiers discussing something ominous, but David reassures him that they will make it back to his mother. As some of the shoppers start to arm themselves, Amanda reveals she has a gun and gives it to Ollie, who is skilled with firearms. Norton, still unconvinced of the danger, decides to leave the store with a small group. David suggests tying a rope to a biker who volunteers to retrieve a shotgun from a car outside. However, as the biker ventures into the mist, the rope suddenly goes taut. When they pull it back, only the biker's lower half remains, horrifying everyone. Later, a massive flying creature appears at the store window, followed by several others. David realizes the lights are attracting the creatures and rushes to turn them off. However, the shop window shatters and the creatures pour into the store. Chaos ensues as the creatures attack, injuring and killing several people. David and the others use makeshift torches to fend off the creatures, and Ollie manages to kill one, saving Billy. After a fierce struggle, they manage to plug the window and restore some order, but the horror is far from over. As the night progresses, tensions in the store escalate. One person remarks that Mrs. Carmody's premonition has come true, noting that she predicted the creatures would come for them during the night. David checks on the survivors, discovering that one man has been fatally injured, while another person has taken an entire bottle of sleeping pills. Realizing the store is no longer safe, David gathers with some of the remaining survivors to discuss a plan. They agree that they need to leave, but first David suggests going to the pharmacy next door to gather supplies for the injured before attempting to escape in his car. Some survivors agree with David's plan, but Amanda expresses her fear that the mist may extend farther than they think, making escape impossible. David acknowledges the risk but is also deeply concerned about Mrs. Carmody's growing influence. Her religious rantings are starting to sway more of the group, increasing the danger of hysteria and violence among the survivors. Amanda insists that the people in the store are civilized and wouldn't resort to barbaric practices, but Dan points out that fear and desperation can drive people to do unimaginable things. A few hours later, David and a small group prepare to head to the pharmacy. Billy, terrified of losing his father, cries and begs David not to go. David reassures Billy, promising that he will return. As they move toward the exit, Mrs. Carmody stands in their way, proclaiming that venturing into the mist will bring God's wrath upon them by attracting the creatures. Despite her warnings, Private Jessup, a soldier who has decided to join the group, steps forward, leaving his fellow soldiers behind in the store. The group ventures into the mist and makes it to the pharmacy. As they search for supplies, they come across web-like structures in the ceiling and discover people cocooned in them, stuck to the walls and ceiling. One of the cocooned people suddenly grabs Jim, revealing himself to be the military police officer who had entered the store earlier. He begins convulsing, his eyes turning white, and desperately apologizes, saying it was all their fault. Suddenly, giant spider-like creatures appear, and Ollie tries to shoot one, but more creatures emerge, spitting acidic webs. One man gets caught in the webbing, which begins to melt his skin. The military police officer then falls from his cocoon, his body bursting open as hundreds of small spiders spew out. The group is overwhelmed and retreats, but not everyone makes it back to the store. Once they return, shaken and scared, David clings to Billy, relieved to be back with his son. The following morning, David awakens to find Mrs. Carmody leading a sermon, with a large group of survivors listening to her intently. Ollie remarks that she has become extremely convincing, with many now treating her as a prophet. Even Jim, once skeptical, has fully embraced her teachings. Despite the growing hysteria, David's group remains determined to leave the store. Remembering the military police officer's dying words, David decides to confront the soldiers in the store about what they know. When they find Jessup, he claims ignorance, but the group discovers that the other two soldiers are missing. They eventually find them hanging in the loading dock, having taken their own lives. Jessup admits that the soldiers might have done this after he told them about the officer's confession at the pharmacy. Jim, enraged, drags Jessup into the main area of the store and loudly accuses him of confirming that the mist is the military's fault, due to Project Arrowhead. Jessup reluctantly admits that there were rumors about the military experimenting with an interdimensional portal. Mrs. Carmody seizes the opportunity, declaring that Project Arrowhead has incurred God's wrath. The crowd, now fully under her influence, turns violent. They begin to punch Jessup, and one man stabs him, incited by Carmody's claims. She then orders them to sacrifice Jessup to the creatures in the mist, and the crowd drags him outside, cheering as they lock him out. Jessup begs to be let back in, but within moments, a massive crab-like creature appears and snatches him away. That night, David tries to comfort Billy, who asks him to protect him from the monsters. David promises he will never let the creatures get to him. At dawn, David's group prepares to leave, but Carmody and her followers block the way, accusing them of blasphemy and declaring them sinners. She orders her followers to take Billy as their first sacrifice to the mist. The group is swarmed, and a struggle ensues as Carmody's followers try to seize Billy. In the chaos, Ollie steps forward and shoots Carmody, silencing her permanently. With Carmody dead, her followers back off, allowing David's group to escape. They race through the mist toward David's car, but as they reach it, Ollie is snatched by the giant crab creature. One by one, the remaining group members are picked off by the creatures in the mist, and the group is separated. David, Billy, Mrs. Repler, and Dan make it to the car, but the rest of the group is not as fortunate. As they drive away from the store, they pass by the windows, seeing the remaining survivors watching them leave. Determined to protect Billy, David heads to his house, only to find his wife wrapped in a web cocoon. Overcome with grief, he weeps but resolves to keep going for Billy's sake. They drive as far as they can, witnessing scenes of death and destruction along the way. At one point, a massive behemoth, its body covered in tentacles, lumbers past them, shaking the car with every step. The group continues onward until they eventually run out of fuel, and the car rolls to a stop. Inside the car, the atmosphere is heavy with despair. David looks at the others, seeing the hopelessness in their eyes, and realizes they all share the same grim thought. He retrieves Ollie's gun and discovers there are only 4 bullets left for 5 passengers. Realizing that he would be the one left behind, David makes the heart-wrenching decision. He loads the weapon and fires 4 quick shots, ending the lives of Billy, Mrs. Repler, Dan, and Amanda. Devastated, David screams in agony before stepping out of the car into the mist. Consumed by grief, he shouts and stomps, inviting the creatures to come and take him. As the rumbling grows louder, he braces for the end only to see an armored tank emerge from the fog. To his shock, the mist begins to lift, revealing a military convoy passing by, filled with soldiers and survivors. David collapses to his knees, overwhelmed by the cruel irony. The mist continues to clear as soldiers with flamethrowers and rifles march through, eradicating the creatures. If only they had waited just a few moments longer, they all could have been saved. David's screams echo in the now clear air, filled with unimaginable pain and regret.